It has been a week since U.S. President Donald Trump signed an executive order to ban Chinese tech company social media apps TikTok and WeChat. And this will take effect in 45 days unless they're sold to American companies. Media headlines have been filled with the potential acquisition of TikTok by U.S. companies like Microsoft or Twitter and possible lawsuits against the Trump administration. So where is the ban on TikTok heading? And how serious is the White House plan to purge Chinese tech companies from its internet? To talk about these issues and more, I'm joined in the studio by Professor John Gom from the University of International Business and Economics, and by satellite by Michael Son, co-director of the FISF FinTech Research Center, Fudan University, Edward Lehman, managing director of Lehman, Lee & Xu. And that's our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Zhou Yue. Why don't we start with you, Edward, because NPR has reported that TikTok is planning to sue the Trump administration. The company will arguably say the ban is unconstitutional and the supposed national security concern is basically baseless. What are the chances that TikTok could actually go to this process and win the suit?
Well, I have no doubt that TikTok should engage in a lawsuit over this issue. I mean, there are people that are for it and against it. I mean, the executive order, it stems from Article 2 of the Constitution that the United States President does have this available to him under the Emergencies Act and whether there's an emergency or not. I think that usually courts don't make a determination based on state secrets or whether there is indeed an emergency, but I think that TikTok should bring a lawsuit and will be bringing a lawsuit, I have no doubt about that, because you're seeing essentially a very innovative product that's being taken away by some laws, policies, and regulations in the United States. The question is whether they indeed have the ability to do that and whether the executive orders are written in such a way as they will stand the test of time under the Constitution. So I think that TikTok would be probably best off if they would keep the focus very narrow, that it doesn't meet a certain set of criteria. For example, this under the Department of Commerce to institute it and what particular is a transaction under these rules. And they may be successful in that, but this will be a long slog, like the wheels of justice always move slowly. Executive orders are rather quick and hastily put together, and that's what we see here.
But how will the legal process pan out, and what is going to be the impact on the decision in 45 days when Trump said that he will definitely ban TikTok in America?
Right. I mean, the question is, what does 45 days mean, and what does it mean to be banned specifically? And I think that that's what's unclear with regards to the executive order. It talks about any transaction. Now, to the best of my knowledge, TikTok is free. What I think people don't really look at necessarily is the whole ecosystem that goes with this. One, you've got a place where the United States certainly exports talent and exports Hollywood stars, and historically speaking, and now TikTok is sort of this new generation of Hollywood people, and there's a whole ecosystem that goes together with that. So what does that mean? Lawyers, and those types of people that are involved in these types of transactions, will ByteDance be penalized in some way, shape, or form with regards to their other transactions? So would it be people doing business with them? I think a lot of this remains unclear, and certainly a lawsuit would help. It would be like a declaratory judgment, and it might put a ban on enacting, which is the same thing that we saw with the so-called Muslim ban when they prohibited people from certain nations coming into the United States for visa applications. And that went to court, and that was put on temporary hold until that was sorted out through the legal system. And so we might see the same thing here.
And John, the ban on TikTok and also on WeChat probably will leave a 45 window for the companies. But in what fashion do you think these companies should operate their businesses in the United States any differently than what they've been doing before?
Well, we have to keep in mind that a company like TikTok doesn't create content. It's a content enabler. It's a content facilitator, facilitating American people to exercise their First Amendment rights. So it is I think it's very different from what Ed was talking about, a Muslim ban. The whole idea against this company that this is a Chinese company, it poses a national security threat. It is all can be traced back to its political nature. President Trump just doesn't want to see a Chinese company, particularly a tech company, being successful in the United States, being so widely accepted by the American people. I think that's the bottom line here. But this is a lesson, I think, that for Chinese tech companies to look at. This is a political environment that is not very accommodating to not just Chinese companies, in my view, but all foreign companies operating in the United States. What Secretary of State Pompeo was talking about, these are pretenses, I think. It doesn't hold any water. For example, the national security threat that he was talking about, that's just simply not true. There's an article published in Washington Post on July 13th by the Post technology columnist. I mean, it really literally tore apart the software, examined this in and out, didn't find a shred of evidence that TikTok was doing anything other than normally companies would do in this aspect. So this is a big hoax, in my opinion. It's an excuse to go after a very successful Chinese company, of which many American investors are also part of it. So this is not just a Chinese company, but also has a huge interest representing American people.
And Michael, I want your take on the data security issue, because according to New York Times, CIA analysts told the White House there was no evidence that this Chinese government has access to American user data through TikTok. Also, there are U.S. experts saying that TikTok act no more intrusive in data collection than any competitors like Facebook or Instagram. So is it just like John said, this is punishing TikTok or WeChat because it is a Chinese company?
Yes, I think if you look at apples to apples comparison, the practices of TikTok compared to, say, Facebook or Google, they compare about the same. Actually, all of them collect information on users and use that to monetize. That's their basic business model. In terms of TikTok, TikTok follows all the regulations, the local regulations. All the data is stored in the U.S. and my understanding of backup in Singapore, which is outside the jurisdiction of China. So I think it's, in general, this is something that the data privacies are being held to a different standard for TikTok, and I see that as mostly a political move on the part of the U.S. government. If you look at what Mike Pompeo said, it's very clear what the agenda is to basically clean, they actually use the word clean, the IT infrastructure in the United States from any sort of Chinese involvement. And so this is a part of that cleanup.
And technically, do you think it is possible for TikTok to transfer data back to China, because their data centers are based in the U.S. and Singapore?
Yeah, I think, in general, the question really is, can the Chinese government get access to the data? This is something the CIA has weighed in on. Basically, they don't have direct access, but the question is, can they actually lean on TikTok to actually force the data to be given? These are standard national security concerns. In the United States, it's the same thing. It's been well established that the NSA can ask the U.S. companies to provide information. In fact, there's tens of thousands of these type of requests, of which a great preponderance are actually consummated by the American tech companies. So again, I think that is a little bit of a double standard for that. There's been no evidence that the Chinese government has done that. Certainly, in theory, it could happen, though. Yeah.
Well, I just want to add a note. There's a preponderance of evidence that NSA has actually did it. It has done it. In the old Swiss telco world, there was this Swiss company that was actually controlled by the CIA and NSA. It's an encryption company. The company was controlled by these two organizations, and they have eavesdropped millions and millions of conversations in the 1970s and 1980s, including, for example, conversations by German Chancellor Angela Merkel. So this is not a hypothesis with respect to NSA. It's been done before, it has been done before, and I think it's still going to be done in the future.
So, Edward, obviously there is a double standard there, but how can America convince the world what they're doing is on the right side?
Sure. I mean, the fallback here is that it's a national security issue. I mean, as John Gong said, I mean, all countries, even when Mrs. Merkel's phone was tapped by United States, and friendly allies have been tapped. So this is a constant undertaking. I think we have to look at a few things that are going on at the same time. It's not so much even national security, but it's also, it seems very ironic that there would be a so-called forced sale which has been proposed to, say, Microsoft or another contender to be able to take this over, when at the same time the United States Congress has been parading in the heads of the big tech companies who actually have almost a monopolistic stranglehold on the industry right now as it stands in the United States. TikTok is innovative, as John Gong had said. I mean, it's promoting freedom of speech, freedom of thought. There is a potential, and that's the whole thing, is a potential risk. We don't have an identifiable risk, and that's where it's difficult. And then you've got the backdrop of what's going on with China hawks versus the China doves. Those people who want to, promote and benefit a harmonious relationship with China, and those people are trying to pull that thing down. And given the tenor of the situation today, the hawks are it seems more popular in that viewpoint, and it probably shouldn't be. And that's why I think it's going to be better to settle it in a court ordered situation rather than by executive order, which I think will give TikTok at least a level playing field, should be, under the judicial system with regards to whether this is lawful or not, rather than giving it over to private enterprise to take and essentially sell. It doesn't become a public security issue, but it becomes the big tech selling this off to police departments and whatnot. So pick your poison, essentially, in the United States.
And we've also collected some opinions on the internet on the high-profile case of TikTok in America. Let's take a look at what some of them have been saying. There are people saying that I really don't get the whole TikTok drama. The U.S. is worried that China might be infringing on users' privacy while the NSA continues mass metadata collection. Are they actually upset about people's privacy, or that someone else might be doing it too? So this is basically your point, John, that is saying what the United States government has been doing is to collect data for national security reasons. Probably the Chinese government has also been doing that, but the key is that has the Chinese government accessed the data from private companies like TikTok for national security? There's no proof of that. Why China should be put on a different scale other than the United States when there is no evidence supporting the claims? John?
Well, this is also the argument waged against Huawei. It's basically an argument based on hypothesis, on theory. In other words, this is something theoretically can do, something potentially can do, but we don't have any track record actually being done so far with respect to Huawei and with respect to TikTok as well. If the United States government has any evidence at all, we already have put it on the table, but none so far. So it's all rhetoric.
What about the argument that they think that the Chinese system is different? They don't have trust in the Chinese system. That's why they will lay blame in the way.
Well, I mean, they're quoting a law, a piece of legislation called Chinese National Intelligence Act, Article 7, in a wrong way, in my opinion. I mean, it basically says that organizations, entities in China need to cooperate with the Chinese government in terms of collecting intelligence information. But there's a provision there saying that, provided that's not harming the company's interest, right? Harming other people's interest. So the other part of the clause was never quoted, was never referred to by Secretary of State Pompeo. So I think it's a one-sided, lopsided interpretation of an argument of a piece of legislation to make an argument. So this is absolutely wrong.
And Michael, about the alleged acquisition offer by Microsoft. Microsoft has been in talks with ByteDance, the owner of TikTok, to purchase its U.S. operations. What is in it for Microsoft? Why Microsoft want to do that? And can it put through?
Well, Microsoft stands to gain a lot. They're trying to break into the market. TikTok has done a tremendous job at really enabling a new social media platform that has been very, very viral through the innovation that was previously discussed. So I think Microsoft has a lot of synergies to be able to do this. I think a more pertinent question is whether or not they should be able to, right? And I think this is something that's very interesting, that we have the President of the United States essentially pushing this forced divestiture of a Chinese company of this interest into a U.S. company's hands. I think that there is a little bit of a problem here because the government should not be meddling in the private businesses of different companies outside of national security concerns. But this is the very point. The point is that this national security law as foreign adversaries has been used as a convenient way to really force the hand of various Chinese companies in the U.S.
But there were questions, John, because Microsoft have not seen a track record of running social media apps successfully before. And also, what part of operations should Microsoft buy? Is it just the American operation of TikTok or the global operations of TikTok? How will the algorithms be divided between the U.S. market and the other markets?
Well, Microsoft is a great company. It has ventured into businesses that it hasn't ventured into before and been quite successful. For example, Microsoft is very successful in selling appliances these days, laptop, computers, stuff like that. I'm actually a very proud shareholder of Microsoft. I own some little shares of Microsoft.
Okay.
I wish the company is successful. So it has a great management team.
There is a conflict of interest here.
Small shareholder. But I think Microsoft has a great future in positioning itself as a big player in the social media business. And I think it's actually good for American people because right now there's not much of a competition. The U.S. government is, I think it's the Justice Department or the Federal Trade Commission is investigating Facebook and other companies, the big four companies, internet companies, about their anti-competitive behavior, abuse of dominance behaviors. And I think with Microsoft being a potential entrant into this market, introduces competition and introduces competition to the American people. I think it's a great thing for the market. Now, in terms of the question whether Microsoft can be successful or not, I have a lot of hope that it will be because the company has been especially talented in many areas and. Is a great CEO and under the leadership of Bill Gates. He's a very visionary person. So I think it has a great potential. It should buy it. I think it's a very good option for ByteDance to sell it. Now, I haven't asked you a question about its operation. The acquisition. Allegedly, reportedly, it's buying the 5 countries. Other than UK. So it's United States, New Zealand, Canada, and Australia, right.
But the case is that will ByteDance really want to sell their operations to American company? According to the CEO, Zhang Yimin, he told employees in an internal letter that beyond their allegations that the app poses security risks, there is more to ban that. It is not about security of data because they want to see the failure of a Chinese tech company on the global market.
Yeah, that's what the White House was coming from. But I think under this very dire circumstance, I think Mr. Trump doesn't have much of a choice. I think selling to Microsoft is probably the best of the worst options. I think with the attitude coming from Washington D.C., the situation with respect to TikTok's operation in the United States has continued to worsen, in my opinion, if it's not sold. So I think it's a good idea just to sell it.
Okay. If that is the only way for ByteDance to go, Michael, what kind of message will this send to the rest of the world down the road? Because if a Chinese company becomes successful in its global operation, it has the access to data information of Western countries, particularly the U.S., then it might be kicked off.
Yeah, I think this is not a very positive development. I think it does the most damage to the U.S., frankly. The U.S. is really the leading champion in the world for free markets, due process, and rule of law. And in this case, all three of these elements have been, in my opinion, grossly violated by unilateral action, unsubstantiated action from the U.S. So, I'm an American citizen, right? I would love to see the U.S. stand for the rights and freedoms of its people and for the companies to be able to operate in a competitive, unbiased marketplace, and to be able to, resolve any issues and disputes through the court of law with due process and the rule of law. And I think, unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be the case in terms of what's happening here in the States. Now, this is something actually that has precedence, right? In the 80s, in fact, when the foreign adversary was Japan, not China, it was the exact same script. So, history tends to repeat itself, not rhyme. And so I think that we can take lessons from that. In that era, Toshiba, Hitachi also sanctioned a lot of trade embargoes and things like this. And it was only after in the 90s when Japan stopped being the technological power and the semiconductors shifted to Taiwan and Korea that this subsided. So I think this is just the adversary du jour. Yeah.
It's interesting you bring up that point, because I remember once Andy Grove, the CEO of Intel, once said that America could become a colony of tech information by Japan in the 1990s. And then Japan buckled. Do you think China will probably do the same and retreat it from American market, or other directions?
Well, I think the situation. This is why I say history tends to rhyme, not completely repeat itself, in the sense that we can draw lessons from the reaction from America at the time with its foreign adversary. But in this case, China, as the new sort of rising power, is in a different position. This is the classic case of that we call it this Thucydides trap, where we have a rising power fighting the incumbent or challenging the incumbent, and the incumbent having various sort of reactions to that. In this particular case, China is on a path to a lot of development in critical technologies and areas across AI and 5G and in fintech and blockchain and things like this. It will be very hard for America to apply these same techniques to success here in this case, because China is already a rather dominant power, and it also has a lot of advantages in terms of the incumbent market, which it can draw from, even in light of things like sanctions.
And John, what do you think? Because we've heard that the ByteDance is trying to move its operations more to Europe and probably to other markets as well. Do you think China is different now in 2020 than Japan in 1980s?
Well, one big difference that I can immediately think of is the size of the market, the sheer size of the market. Historically, an economy as large as China it can indeed grow even on its own. For example, the United States economy grew very much based on its domestic economy after the Civil War, for example, right? So, it's not something that is critically to China, to be hanging on to the U.S. market. I think in the worst scenario, even if all the American Chinese companies operating in the United States were kicked out of the U.S. market, it's going to make a small dent into the Chinese economy. Of course, this is something we don't want to see.
Do you think it also has to do with the different political and strategic relationships between China and Japan and the U.S.?
That's another reason. I don't think the Chinese leadership would adopt the same approach as the Japanese leadership did in the 1980s, because this is a very different system. This is a very different group of people leading the country. So and I think at a very fundamental level, this country, this civilization has survived on its own for so many years, for thousands of years, that the Chinese people have a lot of pride in ourselves, and we're not going to succumb to any kind of external pressure like this. As a matter of fact, on the contrary,
especially practices that sound so unfair.
Exactly. I was just about to say that it's the exact opposite. As you have more and more influence and pressure exerted upon us, the Chinese nation is going to even rise higher and respond to that.
Okay, but Edward, besides Trump and his cabinet members, what are the other forces or institutions that might be supporting banning TikTok in America?
Well, certainly the net winners are going to be big tech in America. I mean, this TikTok
Facebook, for example?
Just so everyone understands. Yeah, well, right. Facebook, for example, this certainly Microsoft would be a net winner, and all big tech and just in general, because this gives them an opportunity. There's always been this complaint about the internet. I mean, first of all, we're creating, and this wasn't necessarily brought up by Michael or John, but we're creating a splinter net, not an internet. So really, the United States should be supposedly the place in which the internet is to be fair and open and whatever they want to say it is under the laws, policies, and regulations. The net winners would be big tech, because it's a for sale, and there's only a few people or a few organizations that would be able to buy that. And again, I mean, the so-called purchase was going to be buying 30% of that, and Mr. Trump had retorted saying, well, I don't understand why they would buy just 30% of that. So all this remains to be seen, and the devil's in the details. Being a lawyer and being involved in mergers and acquisitions, it would take more than 45 days to do due diligence on this organization. Also, TikTok is a behemoth. It's the largest and the most successful startup in the history of the world, I guess. It's $75 billion is the value of the organization, and to try to put a number on it and to be able to quantify that is going to be a very difficult undertaking for teams of lawyers and accountants to do it. But I do see that creating this splinter net will actually wind up having unintended consequences, which could hurt America, seen as one of our chief exports. Again, is entertainment, is this kind of technology, and TikTok managed to have an algorithm that was more successful than the one that was put out by Facebook, and they will wind up being a loser and being forced to do something that they don't want to do, which is not been asked of by big tech, by Congress yet, to break up those organizations. This almost seems to be reverse thought processes. So I don't think it was really well thought out. I think that legal challenges will ensue, and I see that there's going to be some change.
But this is election year, John. Secretary of State Pompeo said clean network, and Trump's decision to ban TikTok. Do you think it is just a blip, or it probably will become a trend with bipartisan support after the election?
No, I don't buy that argument. I think Biden's China policy is going to be noticeably different. And I'm hopeful. Actually, the trend is showing that, at least the polls are showing that President Trump is going to be voted out by the American people on November 3rd.
That's a very big bet.
I would bet a lot of money on this proposition. So.
All right, we're running out of time. Thank you, John, and thank you, Michael. Thank you, Edward. You've been watching Dialogue here on CGTN. I'm Joe in Beijing. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.